John Malkin, and you're listening to Transformation Highway on KZSC 88.1 FM, kzsc.org, broadcasting from the University of California, Santa Cruz. Transformation Highway is broadcast every Thursday at noon, California time. The following interview was originally broadcast on March 3rd, 2026. Today you'll hear an interview with prolific singer-songwriter David Rovics. He's based in Portland, Oregon, and often produces songs within a day or two of world events. He was recently here in Santa Cruz, California for a concert at the El Rio Mobile Home Park Community Room. His latest album is called Insurrection Act. Here now is David Rovics. I'm often blown away that you write songs, record them, and put them out, sometimes very quickly responding to world events and your ideas about them. I'm imagining you have already made some songs about the latest manifestation of war and the United States involvement in that. The U.S. started bombing Iran a few days ago. Israel began bombing Lebanon. Iran is bombing Dubai. There's a lot of missiles flying. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about all of that, and if you are creating some music already about that.
Yeah, I've been writing incessantly. I especially since last August, I started working a lot with AI music generation. So I've been writing a lot of lyrics and then working with Suno to come up with music. And so the process is kind of insanely fast and good. Like you end up with really good music with amazing production values that people love until they find out that there's AI involved and then they want to throw up. It's just how it is. But, songs are, who was it who said there's two kinds of music, good music and bad music? I think Duke Ellington maybe, or somebody, one of those big band people. But it's, you can, I've written, I think, over 100 songs with with Suno over the past several months and over the past few weeks. Like they're mostly about the various imperial moves on Venezuela, Cuba, Iran, Syria, all over the place. And just wrote a song yesterday called The Number One Sponsor of Terror on the Planet, which of course is the U.S., and wrote one the day before that called The Empire Strikes Back about this war that the U.S. and Israel has started on Iran. I've got a lot of thoughts, certainly about the wars and this war and the wars that the U.S. and Israel start all the time. You can tell my bias by the way I'm phrasing that already, but very different from the mainstream U.S. Western media. But I think. The U.S.'s quest for ever greater empire seems to just continue under both parties incessantly forever, and Trump is just an incredibly. He's just a clownish version of the emperor with such great power and so little clue about anything. No, this seems to be one of the, if there's any unifying aspect to Trump's policies among the analysts from every different political background, if they're being honest, it's that he seems to be completely incompetent and is being just led by the nose by the most insane sort of neo-fascist war hawks, like the like who dominates Netanyahu's cabinet and and Netanyahu's brain.
I would love to hear you sing and play some songs as you enjoy during this interview. And you already mentioned that you've been using artificial intelligence to make songs. And you said that people love the songs until they realize that they're AI and then they want to throw up. It's interesting because this radio station where this will be broadcast, KZSC, at recent meetings, people are talking about banning AI music from the radio station. And I looked around and it looks like some radio stations are doing that already. My familiarity with your music goes back years and years, and I love songs like I'm a Better Anarchist Than You that are humorous and poignant too, and Failed State. And I love the songs you performed in Santa Cruz recently. And I told you that where you're highlighting people who have taken direct action to obstruct injustice, people who did a mutiny on an arms shipment ship heading to Vietnam that was going to be used to kill people in Vietnam. And instead, they took these armaments somewhere else. You have a song about John and Bonnie Raines, who broke into the FBI office and discovered the COINTEL program, which is a humongous find and informed activism ever since then. And all of that music has a rawness and an edginess to it, an independent sort of DIY feeling to it. The artificial intelligent produced music is really clean and crisp and produced. And the music I heard, it's a different voice than you as well. It's a woman's voice. Tell me what you're enjoying. I'm hearing that one thing you're enjoying about it is it does it really fast. And but tell me what you're enjoying about using AI to create music. And I'm imagining you are having interesting discussions with people about don't do that. And how are you feeling about that? And how do you respond to that?
Well, so so far my experiences have been with working with AI to create music. It's challenged a lot of assumptions that I have, and for a lot of people, I can see how challenging it is in so many ways, and I think that's not at all surprising, and it's also really interesting. And I tend to think that, as far as working with it goes, as far as that aspect of the question. First of all, one of the kind of strangely gratifying things that I keep on rediscovering is that I am a better lyricist than any AI chatbot. So that's kind of neat. I don't know how long that'll last. Eventually they'll get good at writing poetry. So far they really are good at writing cliche kind of stuff that doesn't really get you in any particular way. Although, their ability to, write stuff that conforms to a certain syllabic meter and that sort of thing is amazing. That sort of thing it does amazingly well. But in terms of coming up with good lyric ideas and it doesn't so far. To the limited extent I've worked with AI on lyrics, it's I just basically gave up, and then I see other people's attempts, and every time I see it, I think I see it's still not doing what anyone would want it to do. At least I wouldn't. I would reject all these efforts that people sometimes share with me. That, if they're looking for feedback and on what it seems like, what I think of what they're producing, but what the AI has become just unbelievably good at is coming up with inventive music to lyrics, and the it only works really as well as it does with the stuff I'm doing, because I know what I'm doing as a producer, and what you can get out of the platforms, if you have experience working with a band in a studio, telling musicians what to do, if you've had those experiences on a regular basis, then you know beyond any doubt whatsoever that working with the AI musicians is basically the same. And you are working with creative artists who are not going to play what you're telling them to play note for note. But when you tell them you're looking for a vibe that's kind of like newgrass hip hop, they know exactly what you're going for, or at least they can guess at it. And then if they don't get what you're going for after a few iterations of it, then you get, slightly vary the prompts, slightly edit the lyrics. And, so it's a creative process that tends to last sometimes, for hours for each song. But by the end of that process, instead of having just like a finished song that's not yet recorded, I have a song that has like 15 different parts that are all amazingly well executed, and of course, yeah, the production values are incredibly high. So like anything I've recorded, even good recordings in a good studio, compared to this stuff, sounds like mud. And if you're playing it, and that's the case when you're trying to cut through the sound of traffic and you're playing through a sound system at like an outdoor protest, right? So like there's a lot of need for good music at protests, live and recorded. But as far as the recorded stuff goes, it's going to tend to sound like mud unless it's like really, really highly professionally recorded stuff. So you can spend $50,000 to record like that kind of quality stuff with a band in a big studio, or at this point you can have a Suno membership for $10 a month, But like from a musical standpoint, I think what I find happens is once people hear the songs that I've worked with Suno to create, and then they hear the versions that me and Kamala do acoustic with an acoustic guitar and two voices, they love the songs just as much as they would like any of my songs, and they sometimes they can feel that there's some kind of other influence in there, But as a artist, I've always been trying to work with different ideas in order to come up with fresh music. And I think that I think I'm a good and prolific lyricist, but when it comes to coming up with really interesting, good music that doesn't sound like the stuff I was doing a few years ago, which I think is a good thing to change your sound and, just for your own musical evolution, not just for your audience, But I always like to experiment, and this is just another brilliant way to experiment. I've experimented with started playing with open tunings mostly 20 years ago, and started playing with Mando related instruments and bowed instruments, and done a lot of different things to kind of keep things interesting musically for myself and hopefully for others. But yeah, Suno is just another way to do that. But it's certainly the most controversial one, and I've certainly never been criticized so much for giving away free music in my life. But the thing is that this technology, you can see absolutely how devastating it is already and will be for the arts and for all white collar workers and for the economy. And, it's just like automation was, except in a much bigger way. And it's coming for the white collar jobs instead of the blue collar ones. And it'll come for the blue collar ones next once the robots get cheaper. But, it's, I mean, AI, just like all other forms of sort of technology, we're confronted again and again with the inequality of the society and with the basic problems of the means of production being privatized while, everything else is everybody still has to somehow survive, and if those, if there was ever going to be universal basic income, this is the kind of time that you would think that they'd be introducing it instead of, making people work to get food stamps, which is, the opposite direction, but that's, the UBI crowd doesn't seem to be dominant in this AI obsessed government, One of the songs I wrote recently was about the War Department trying to force Anthropic to cave to their demands so that they participate in mass domestic surveillance and automated killing machines.
I wonder if you want to play that song for us. I also, the last 3 minutes of what you had to say about AI is what I would expect you, David Rovics, to say about artificial intelligence and have a criticism from that angle. So with that criticism, do you expect that at some point you will abandon using AI to create music because it's at a cross with your political values and viewpoint?
I would. So the one of the main sort of propaganda efforts on the part of the oil industry was always to emphasize our personal responsibility in preventing climate change by driving less and conserving energy while they are selling us oil, and while they're bribing the government to make sure to destroy the railways and this problem is systemic, and what we do as individuals in terms of which products or services we use or don't use in this capitalist economy truly doesn't matter. And the sooner people can see that, the better. The sooner people can understand the systemic nature of this situation and how they are just, basically agreeing with the Exxon Corporation if they think that their lifestyle changes are gonna, if you agree with the Exxon Corporation, you should be thinking about that, because this is the kind of disempowering thinking that we're generally stuck with. We live in a society dominated by, we live in a society now where most people with white collar jobs are being told they have to use AI. So it's like, it's not an optional thing anyway. It's here and it's everywhere. You have to use AI, and when you get to your job, you have to drive there in a private car because there's no mass transit. So you're going to burn oil on the way there. And that's just how it is. We live in this society. And then the only people who can afford to walk to work are the rich who can afford to live downtown. The rest of us who are, exiled to the exurbs, where it's affordable to live, we're also stuck with, driving cars because there's no way to get in downtown. And, it's just the whole thing. Capitalism just compounds all these problems that are not of our making and are not of ours to solve, as far as individual, choices. AI AI is going to destroy the music industry. It's going to destroy Hollywood. It's going to cause massive amounts of unemployment among the ranks of people who used to be lawyers, paralegals, nurses, doctors, uh, managers, administrators, accountants, producers, engineers, all those jobs are going away. They're all going to be replaced by AI. That's all going to be happening in the next decade. And there's nothing individuals are going to be able to do about it. Capitalism is way, way more powerful than our individual choices. If there is money to be made, and if there are mountains of cash to be made from, firing your workers and replacing them with AI, does anybody think for a second that the people, those capitalists, are going to keep their workers and not take AI? I mean, that would be against their corporate charter to do that. They're in the business of serving their shareholders, and they know where the money is. The money is in laying off the workers.
Thanks for explaining that. Very interesting for me to hear that. And I had the idea that you had started using AI to make music because you had gone through this period where your music was banned and pulled off of the Internet World Wide Web machine. But it sounds like that's not really why you're doing that. And I'd love for you to tell people about that experience. 99% of your music is very overtly political in talking about what's happening in the world and being critical about war and poverty and systems of abuse. One of the realms that you sing about, of course, is the Palestinian occupied territories and the violence that has been mashed upon them for so long. And I think that that's the material that was the reasoning on the part of whoever banned you from YouTube and other places. Tell us about being banned, how that happened. And I think you appealed to your fans in the world at large, and your material is back available. Tell us about that journey.
Well, I mean, so first of all, as far as my AI alter ego, and she's female, and because I've been a male for my whole life, and I know what it's like to sing as a male, so like I'm having a great time, not at all tired of having a female voice, and she isn't a particular voice. I'm not doing that persona thing. It's just I just always click the female vocals thing, option, but so there is this kind of persona aspect to the artist, and I gave the artist a different name since it's not me, and it doesn't make sense to call this person David Rovics. It's too confusing. But so then it doesn't get into the algorithms as far as my own songs go, but so as an artist, it gets just completely ignored on all the streaming platforms because it's not me, and so I'm in the algorithms to some extent, but to the extent that I'm in the algorithms, Aitsuno is not because of that different name phenomenon. But that does not stop her songs from getting banned occasionally, because if I put up a video or on YouTube music or on YouTube, as I've done before, of some of those songs, if it's a topic that gets flagged, it has also, some of those songs have also been taken down. But as a separate identity, with a different distributor, so far the music I put up as Aitsuno does go up on YouTube Music, on the streaming platform, the music streaming platform, and whereas my new albums, like my new one that just came out at the beginning of this month, Insurrection Act, is available on all the streaming platforms except for YouTube Music, where I am seem to be basically permanently banned. But so like, as far as like all this, I mean, in different ways, I can tell lots of stories about different elements of the Israel supporting crowd in different countries trying to cancel my career for the past 26 years. But it's been much more intense since the genocide in Gaza in October 2023 began. And so since then, I had already written a lot of songs in solidarity with the Palestinians, about the Palestinian struggle, and what was going on there for many years, which has been one of the main things that's gotten me into trouble and gotten other people into trouble over the past 26 years, since I started writing these kinds of songs. But in the past 3 years, or since October 23, it's been first there was lots of warnings on YouTube for different songs that got taken down for violating their rules on supporting violent criminal organizations. And those songs then eventually, after a number of warnings and songs being taken down, then they demonetized my channel completely in January 25. And then in November 25, they deleted all my albums from YouTube Music. And then in January 26, they gave me my first strike, and you're supposed to get 3 strikes and then you're out. But they just gave me 1 strike, and then they deleted my channel a few days later. And then about a month after that, in February, I heard about a guy named Guy Christensen, who a well-known 20-year-old pundit out there, and Palestine solidarity advocate out there on many different platforms these days, who has 140,000 followers on X. But he somehow or other managed to. He did a little video that went viral and that was demanding his YouTube channel back, because he got his YouTube channel, his TikTok account, and Instagram all canceled on the same day. Not that they're coordinating with the Zionists or anything. But so he got his YouTube channel back through this viral video, and demanding that YouTube, put it back, and that, suggesting that people cancel their YouTube premium accounts until then. And so I just copied exactly at my best, as best I could, exactly what he had done, and I did at his suggestion, I did a portrait, sort of less than 2 minute long video with captions, and it also went viral and got seen 137,000 times and reposted thousands of times, and quite a few people canceled their YouTube premium subscriptions. And then 24 hours after that video went out and started going viral, then I got an email from YouTube saying that they had reconsidered my case and decided that I was not, after all, violating their rules, although they kept on since then they've taken down more songs. But they're not giving me warnings. They're just taking down songs. So they seem to have decided, at least for now, that it was too over the top to actually delete my channel, and they should go back to the policy of just taking down songs they don't like rather than the whole channel. But my albums on YouTube Music are not coming back. And this is something, especially people over the age of 40 often don't understand, that YouTube is the world's biggest video platform, but YouTube Music is a separate but related entity, which is the world's second biggest music streaming platform. And you can be banned on one but still be on the other, and that's how it is with me. And if you're not on YouTube Music, that means that there are so many fewer songs that anybody's ever going to hear of yours, because so much of what happens with YouTube Music is you're getting people are getting sent there from YouTube. So it's like they're listening to a Billy Bragg song on YouTube, and then that theme or that artist they think like somebody, they're going to like David Rovics, and so then they play this song of mine that's actually just an album cover with the music, like from YouTube Music. But that's how people end up on YouTube Music a lot, and you can see how it works, because there's a lot of those songs that used to have a lot of plays on YouTube Music.
My name is John Malkin, and this is Transformation Highway. You're listening to KZSC 88.1 FM, kzsc.org, broadcasting from the University of California, Santa Cruz. Today you're listening to an interview with singer-songwriter David Rovics. His latest album is called Insurrection Act. Here again is David Rovics. I have another kind of big question for you.
Yay.
Your songs about Gaza and about the genocide there, some of them talk specifically comparing what's happening now or the last recent years to the Jewish Holocaust by the Nazis. And you sang one of those songs here in Santa Cruz, I remember. There's other songs. There's one called 1933. So in recent years, artists and activists who compare what's happening now to the Holocaust usually get a lot of criticism and are often called anti-Jewish just for doing that. The Jewish Holocaust of the 30s was a particular thing that happened in history. And if you look at the details of how it was organized and carried out, there are particular things that happened that haven't exactly happened again in that exact way. So I kind of understand why some people say it's non-comparable. Or this sort of emotional feeling, I sort of understand, of leave it alone as a horror that happened. What's the need of comparing it? On some level, I understand these ideas. I was raised Jewish. I had a bar mitzvah. I went to Hebrew school every Wednesday at Temple Israel of Hollywood. I went to Israel when I was 17, and it was pretty mind-blowing in a lot of ways, but in one way, seeing how Arab people lived compared to Jewish people. It's a tiered society. It was long before the wall was erected there, but definitely separate cultures. And already that was 1979, it felt like a semi-war zone. The kibbutz where we stayed had metal shutters just in case. And if you saw a package on a bench, you told someone wearing a uniform and carrying a gun because maybe it was a bomb. And I've been concerned as an adult seeing the United States become kind of more like that, Israelified, which is terrible. Anyway, to make this even more complex, I want to hear from you about the challenge of this comparison and the importance of this comparison. The importance seems obvious to me. This is the grotesque example that we can point to, and then we can say, ooh, we're now about 20% closer to that grotesque example than we were 6 months ago. That seems useful potentially. And on the other hand, it's the criticism about doing that, it can be very, very intense. Yeah, tell me about making that comparison and why that's important to you and the criticism that you faced.
I think without ever making that comparison, I would have faced all sorts of negative consequences for writing songs in solidarity with the Palestinian struggle. Like, and I did before I ever, made that comparison. But but the songs I was writing before I ever made any comparisons with the Nazi Holocaust were songs that were humanizing people, like doing things like blowing themselves up on a bus full of soldiers, and that's not welcome. That humanizing anybody who would do something like that is not a welcome thing in among those who would silence voices like mine, in this society, in this world, on this internet. So you don't need to make that comparison in order to get all kinds of vilification. And certainly there have been, for very good reason, lots of people within the Palestine Solidarity movement, particularly among Palestinians and non-Jews, who have very intentionally avoided such comparisons. I think it behooves those of us of Jewish lineage who have a familiarity with the Nazi Holocaust and with how it was conducted in great detail to be the ones to be pointing out the incredible similarities between the genocide being perpetrated against the people of Gaza and the genocide that was carried out against Jews and communists and homosexuals and many other people in Europe in the concentration camps. Thing that I think is extremely important for people to understand out there is that first of all, while the totally mechanized killing of millions of Jews and millions of communists and others in the gas chambers was a completely new way of, totally mechanized, industrialized killing. It was modeled after the much more primitive method, but still very deadly, of asphyxiating huge numbers of Armenians in Turkey, just 3 decades earlier. But so there's one thing that's really important for the general public to understand about this comparison and about genocide generally, which is that we have learned in Western education throughout the since the 1940s to the present. There's been to the extent that we learn anything about World War II, which used to be something we learned a lot about, right, in school. We learned that Nazi Germany was exceptional, and the really unfortunate thing about the history of colonialism is that they were not exceptional. And the idea of Nazi exceptionalism is a myth of colonial powers that wanted to separate the horrific crimes against humanity committed in Africa and in Asia by powers like Britain and the United States and France, and Germany. Separate those crimes from the Nazi Holocaust and emphasize the differences rather than the similarities. That's one thing that's important, I think. But something that's even probably more important for people to understand is that, for the Jewish population that survived the Holocaust, like the surviving members of my family, not the dead ones, but because like my grandma lost touch with entire the entire family from Belarus, from Minsk. She didn't ever get back in touch with any of them. But the people near the German borders in every direction, especially like the Netherlands and Belarus and Ukraine, the Jewish populations of those places were completely decimated. The Russians did much better, because they were able to protect a lot of their Jews. But so there's this huge crowd of people of Jewish lineage who have taken away from the Holocaust this idea that this should never happen again to anybody, right? But there's a very also huge crowd that took away a very different lesson, which is screw everybody else. This should never happen again to us. And that crowd has been running Israel since 1948 or before that. And they're a ruthless bunch of racists and genocidal killers that have been running that country since the inception of the country. And they don't take the never again lesson. They take the lesson, very different lesson, which is very hard for a lot of people to wrap their heads around, which is, look what they did. Let's do that. It worked for them. It'll work for us. They think that way. I know that because I know those people and I hear from them regularly, in person. I'm not talking about trolls. I'm not talking about AI bots, actual people, Jewish citizens of Israel. They tell me to my face, you killed your Indians. We're just doing the same thing. They say that regularly, daily. There's millions of people that think that way. It's the most racist society I've ever seen, and I've spent a lot of time in this country and in Australia, and Israel, no comparison. When you surround a walled ghetto, you surround a ghetto with walls, and then you prevent them from eating or from having water, the model that you're emulating is the Warsaw Ghetto. That's your model. You are General Stroop, and they're the Jewish fighting organization inside there. And lo and behold, they launched a ghetto uprising, just like the Jewish fighting organization would have done. And they did exactly the things the ZOB would have done if they had ever been able to get out of the ghetto and into Germany. Of course, they were in Poland in the first place, but this is a population that had been literally, kept on a below human intake level of calories for 20 years, that had no clean water left, that the UN was saying, they were living in a place that was basically uninhabitable. And that was long before 2023, they reacted by a rebellion of survival, of existential level, survival kind of rebellion, which has been so completely distorted, by the Israelis and by the Western press, who have buried all evidence of anything that really happened and who killed who, and made up all kinds of wild stories about the babies and everything, as they always do. But this was a rebellion of a walled-in, ghettoized population that was basically the Walking Dead, which is also what the Jews called each other in Warsaw, the Walking Dead. That's the same thing. They called themselves that too in Gaza for the same reasons. The comparisons are really endless, actually, and they're all really important. And in my song, just like the Nazis did, each one of those verses is talking about a comparison that's totally actually, relevant, which is not to say that the title should be understood to mean that everything that Israel does in Gaza is just like the Nazis did 100%. You have to actually listen to the song, but each of the verses is about one different aspect of the genocidal behavior that's the same.
My father's family were Jewish people from Riga, Latvia, and my mother's family was Jewish from Polish-Russian border. And my mom's father escaped and tried to convince the rest of the family to come, and they weren't quite ready to do that. And a lot of them were killed by the Nazis. And I took in so much reading and films about the Holocaust as a kid, and it became a really significant part of my thinking and my awareness, and still is. I want to ask you one more thing, and it's very related, but it's kind of the other side, if you will. You have a song, an old song called After the Revolution, which is playful and funny and sort of expresses what I thought might happen or might begin to start happening in my lifetime. Opening the prisons, no more missiles, police put down their guns. You actually mention also some political prisoners being released after the revolution. And Leonard Peltier, you mentioned in the song, he has been released, sort of. He's in a home instead of a prison under arrest. It's better for him. What about the revolution? Where are we in the revolution? Do you still believe in the revolution?
I mean, whatever, like the revolution as I believe in social movements accomplishing anything, and that can take a lot of different forms. And whether it takes a form that we would label revolution, I think sure. I certainly believe in revolution, and there's lots of examples of around the world of recent events that have been called revolutions that have been overwhelmingly positive for the people. Whether we're talking about the Cuban Revolution or the election of Hugo Chavez, which a lot of people would refer to as a sort of a revolutionary kind of window, kind of like because I think it's important to not be too stuck on ideas of like reform versus revolution and what does that mean. I mean, there's all sorts of situations where there can be various elements of society that have influence, that where there's the possibility for real serious social change that can happen on an incremental, or at least what appears to be an incremental basis, rather than requiring some sudden violent upturning of the political order. I would say that there's really revolutionary aspects to the whole development of social democracy in Scandinavia as it's developed, although there's still huge problems with it in all kinds of ways, and huge problems with democracy for that matter, even when it's, sometimes especially when it's more authentically practiced, but no more, especially when it's really just a fig leaf for what is an auction, but yeah, I think social change is always possible when there's well-organized social movements, and well-organized social movements that are also fulfilled with vision and optimism. And but we're so far from anything like that now in this country. And throughout the English-speaking world, we have just been convinced that we have no culture, and we've been completely turned into a bunch of misanthropes on the left, and we have no connection to our own musical or other cultural traditions. And we think of it as some kind of appropriation. We have no idea who we are as a people or as a class. The FBI's propaganda campaign on our brains to convince us that we're a bunch of atomized individuals has been wildly successful. And we have literally no live music at all at protests throughout this whole country anymore, with the occasional exceptions in San Francisco. I mean, it is just a dismal situation. It's like, when we talk about the idea of revolution, it's like talking to a bunch of babies about the idea of running a marathon. They haven't learned how to walk yet. So, forget about talking even the concept of a marathon. We can work on trying to learn how to walk. And, first of all, we can think about how to organize an event that leaves people actually wanting to come to another one. Organize a protest that leaves people feeling inspired and optimistic and like they've been part of some kind of a community that has done something together, which is never the case these days. But, and it's not difficult to figure out how to create an event that leaves people feeling like that. You just make sure that it's mostly music. Just, all your events should be mostly music. And you go around the world outside of the United States and Canada and Australia and England, everywhere else in the world, almost. You ask people, what's the beating heart of the social movement? And they'll say music, of course, how do you organize a protest? What happens at a protest? Well, music, of course, it's like 90% of what goes on, and that was up until a few years ago. Last I checked, last time I played at a protest in Germany, which is not known to be one of the most musical places in the world. It's known for a lot of other things. But, that was always the case in Germany. All the protests, 90% music, and if anybody was speaking, it was like, never like a laundry list of every organization that was involved with getting 10 people to that thing. It was like they would have a choice couple of people who knew how to hold a crowd and give a speech. They were often comedians. And that's who they would have speak. That's who they would have, conveying the message of the protest and what they're there for. Give a comedian your talking points and tell the comedian why we're there, and then let the comedian figure out how to do the emceeing. That is brilliant. To get it, find musicians to occupy the time on the stage and tell them we want to communicate a message that is against war and for community. You figure it out. That's all the instruction that any musician needs, unless they're out to sabotage the event, assuming they are against war and for community in the first place, and you're not like getting Kid Rock to play at your anti-war protest, you're going to do just fine telling the musician all that's all they need, But these days, like, even if you might be thinking about somebody who might be thinking about having music at a protest, they will ask what you're planning on singing. And they will ask to see the lyrics. I mean, this is unheard of. This is never the way it used to be. And this is not how it is in most of the world. They don't ask musicians such questions. They assume, they know your music, your political tendencies, and here's your audience. You got 20 minutes. That's it. That's how it works, or used to. But yeah, we need to get back there. That's for sure.
We are kind of out of time, at least for my hour-long radio show. If you have like 5 more minutes, do you have like 5 more minutes?
Yeah. Should I sing you a song? We want to do a song.
I would love a song, but before you sing the song, can you in 2 minutes, like you just said, you described this change in music at protests, and you mentioned the FBI's role, like, what has happened to make that lack of music occur?
That's what I want to know. I mean, some of the things we can see, like one of the things is convincing us through this idea of identity politics. I mean, identity politics basically, when it's weaponized, it convinces us that basically each one of us individually is a separate identity, and we have no culture. And if we do identify with culture, we're culturally appropriating or something, So basically, it seems to have largely killed the idea that people can just share cultural things, share interests, share music that they like, and sort of the melting pot kind of notion is no longer cool, and we can't just like play each other's music. That's appropriating, So that I think that's part of it, in getting that idea into people's heads. And I think also the puritanical thing, this idea that if we're serious about change, that music is frivolous and art and culture is frivolous. And so, I think we're vulnerable as Americans to that puritanical kind of logic. But I think the bottom line is, I'm not sure how this happened, but I feel very much like like those folks in Pennsylvania felt before they raided the FBI offices and discovered COINTELPRO. They're like, I feel like there's a reason why we all feel so paranoid. I feel like there's people planting ideas in our head and trying to get us to do the wrong thing. And I don't know what is happening, but I feel like there's FBI agents all over the place. Like, I feel like half of this group is probably like a bunch of assets, and like, I got to find out. And then they raid the offices and they find out they were right. There were agents on every campus in the country that were doing exactly what they thought was happening, that were intentionally, at every meeting trying to misdirect people. I've talked to people not long ago, older people who are older than me, who have been around a while, and they've been to a lot of meetings, and they say, in their experience, because people often think when I talk about this, it rings true for people. They're, yeah, I feel like I've been through that too. And people will say, like, yeah, when they were organizing protests with their group, as long live music only happened at the protests when people were pushing for it at the meetings, and as soon as people stopped pushing, it stopped happening, and it was always like that. And because the default, which I think is sort of established by whichever FBI agent is assigned to disrupt your organization, they're always pushing to not have music. They're always pushing to be as removed from culture as possible, as boring as possible, and to have the angriest, youngest people on the stage who are going to just tell everybody what they already know and make sure to push them to the forefront and make sure to suppress any voices of nuance, anybody who's good at telling a story or inviting in, the crowd. Make sure that they know that they're just a bunch of old farts and the youth is where it's at. Whatever kind of logic works to make sure to suppress all that kind of tendency. And anybody that thinks music is good, just call them an old hippie and dirty hippie, and they're stuck in the 60s, and why don't you go sing Kumbaya or whatever, say whatever negative stuff. This is just, it's just permeated our culture, and there's a reason that's so permeated the culture, because the most effective social movements that we've ever had in this society, obviously, for anybody looking at them, they're profoundly artistic, musical movements. Look at the industrial workers of the world, the Communist Party in the 30s, the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement in the 60s. These movements were all just like massively musical. And I think the anti-war movement in the 60s was so powerful and so musical that it terrified the powers that be. And so much of the whatever pivot they made after 1971, after those papers were discovered, and after we found out about COINTELPRO, whatever they've been doing is, it's all in the dark, right? We don't know for the most part. But by 1971, they certainly were exactly figuring out at that time this anti-war movement, this music-driven movement that has successfully demilitarized the hearts and minds of millions of young people in this country. This has got to not happen again. They were, I'm sure, deciding at that point, we're going to make sure that music and culture, music and politics are separate. Make sure that they don't find their way together again, because that was way too powerful.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks for that. And if you would enjoy, I would love to hear you play a song, whatever you like.
Yeah. Can never keep track of a pick.
You might be a victim of the FBI's pick kidnapping program.
That's what it is. Picknapping.
Picknapping.
I never noticed how much I lost my picks, until I was traveling with Kamala, and I'm realizing, like, hearing myself say, "Where's my pick?" so many times. I really need to get a pick holder. She was born in Colorado. She died in Minnesota, leaving her wife and 3 kids. Horrified by the election, they moved to Canada, but they moved back, that's what they did. And when ICE came for her neighbors, she came out to do what she could. If the rest of us could be so good. Some people hunker down, hope it will end soon, while other people just have to try. Some folks join the choir, just hope to stay in tune. Other folks just can't stand by. And when they come in to take people away, some of us just must do as they should. If the rest of us could be so good. Some of us take on the kind of worldview that at its heart is all about. If you want to make a country great, then you have to kick a whole lot of people out. While other folks think in terms of solidarity, and thus the world may be understood. If the rest of us could be so good. If the rest of us could be so good. If the rest of us could be so good. For Renee Good. I could sing more for you, if you like.
I would like that. Like I said, my show's an hour, but I'll post a longer version on Indie Media. That's where I usually put stuff.
Long live Indie Media. That's the worst. The first worst thing Facebook did was kill Indie Media. Bisbee, Arizona, 1917. The worst kind of company town anybody's ever seen. Phelps Dodge controlled everything there. They owned everything in Bisbee, everywhere. It was a town of copper miners. That's what people did. Worked beneath the ground, lived in the skids, risking their lives for just enough to survive. It didn't take long when the Wobblies arrived. They went on strike, all the miners down below, and they were shipped away to New Mexico. 85% of the miners had joined in. Mexicans and Anglos, Croatians and the Finns. Then the dirty sheriff working with the company put them in cattle cars that went 500 miles from Bisbee. They went on strike, all the miners down below, and they were shipped away to New Mexico. Wilson said it was outrageous, but Phelps Dodge never faced any consequences for this obvious disgrace. To deport 1,000 people beneath the summer heat, they broke the union in Bisbee, it just couldn't compete. They went on strike, all the miners down below, and they were shipped away to New Mexico. They went on strike, all the miners down below, and they were shipped away to New Mexico. Picture this, the Mediterranean Sea. On the shore, a demolished city. A row of buildings reaching jagged in the air. One open window with a ragged child there. Saying this will be the last message that I send. This is what it looks like at the end. Picture this, a row of body bags. Look at her, this child, wrapped in rags, as she tries to stay warm beneath a tattered plastic sheet, with nothing covering her feet. Saying this will be the last message that I send. This is what it looks like at the end. Picture this, her hands beckon towards the sky, asking God to tell her why. When the fire came crashing with a deafening sound, did her parents have to burn up on the ground? And she writes, this will be the last message that I send. This is what it looks like at the end. This will be the last message that I send. This is what it looks like at the end. this is what it looks like at the end. Well, that's a bit of a downer to leave you on, though.
I was going to say thanks for leaving me with tears in my eyes. But, thank you for articulating that and other things that are part of our world. And there's a power in articulating it and pointing to it and wanting to change that. And I that's what I appreciate about you and your music. And I'm grateful to have had this chance to talk to you about all of that. Thank you for speaking deeply about all of these things.
Thank you, John. It's been a great pleasure. Absolutely. And all those last three songs were AI assisted in the musical part of the compositions. Then I learned them as cover songs with my own lyrics. Strange process.
So interesting. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, John. See you soon.
Yeah, see you soon. You've been listening to an interview with prolific singer-songwriter David Rovics. He's based in Portland, Oregon, and his latest album is called Insurrection Act. My name is John Malkin, and this program is called Transformation Highway. You can hear it every Thursday at noon right here on KZSC 88.1 FM, kzsc.org.